Hey everyone, and welcome. Today we are diving into a grammar rule that, I swear, trips up even the best writers out there. Subject-verb agreement. It sounds so simple, right? But English just loves a good plot twist. Don't worry though, because by the end of this, you are going to have this thing down cold.
Okay, let's just jump right in. Look at this. On the left, you've got the super basic rule we all learned in school. Singular subject, Tom, gets a singular verb, rides. Easy peasy. But then, you look at the sentence on the right. The arrival of new fall fashions have excited shoppers. It kind of sounds right, doesn't it? But it's wrong. Can you see why? This is exactly why we need to dig a little deeper.
So here's how we're going to break it all down. First, we'll look at why this gets so tricky. Then we'll learn how to find the real subject. We'll check out some sneaky singular words and some puzzling plurals. Then we'll tackle the really weird it depends cases. And we'll wrap it all up with one final, simple rule to remember.
All right, so the basic idea couldn't be simpler. Singular subjects go with singular verbs, plural subjects go with plural verbs. But English loves to throw these curveballs by sticking all sorts of distracting words and phrases right between your subject and your verb, making a simple rule feel way more complicated than it needs to be.
And the number one villain in this story? It's called the intervening phrase. Seriously, it's just a bunch of words that wedges itself right between the two most important parts of your sentence. Learning to spot these and just ignore them is the single biggest superpower you can have to get this right every single time.
So, this brings us to our first mission. We have to hunt down the real subject of the sentence. And trust me, it's often hiding in plain sight.
Take a look at this sentence. That whole part, who is chewing on my jeans, that's a classic intervening phrase. It's just extra information. Now imagine you just put your hand over it or mentally cross it out. What are you left with? The dog is usually very good. Bam! Suddenly, it's crystal clear. The dog is.
So the big takeaway here is you have to train your brain to see past these distractions. Phrases that start with things like accompanied by, or as well as, or little prepositional phrases like of the rainbow, none of them change the subject. The real subjects are president, captain, colors, and one. What comes after is just noise.
And this leads to a really cool little trick. I call it the 1S rule. Just think about it for a second. The dog growls, or the dogs growl. See? In most cases in the present tense, you're only going to have one S between the subject and the verb. It's a fantastic little mental check to make sure your sentence sounds right.
All right, you ready for our first major plot twist? We're about to look at subjects that totally sound like they should be plural, but grammatically, they're singular. This is a huge minefield for mistakes. It's actually kind of wild how many words fall into this trap. You've got pronouns like everybody, school subjects like mathematics, even some diseases and movie titles. All of them are treated as a single thing, which means they always take a singular verb.
Let's see it in action. So in the first sentence, yeah, you're talking about a bunch of hot dogs, but the real subject is each, and each is always singular, so each is juicy. Same thing with everybody. The word points to a group of people, but the word itself is singular, so everybody knows.
And, just to keep us on our toes, the reverse is also true. There are some nouns that refer to a single object, but we treat them as if they're plural.
You know, this stuff is actually pretty intuitive when you see the pattern. Things that come in pairs, with two equal parts, like scissors or trousers, always plural. Pronouns like few and many obviously mean more than one. And of course, the classic rule, you join two things with and, you get a plural subject.
But wait, even the classic and rule has a sneaky exception. When you have two nouns joined by and, but they form a single idea, like a dish, red beans, and rice, you treat it as one thing. It's a single concept, so the verb is singular. Red beans and rice is my favorite.
Okay, now we are wading into the deep end. These are what I like to call the grammar chameleons, words that literally change their verb agreement depending on how you use them in a sentence. Collective nouns are the perfect example. Words like team, family, jury. When the group is acting like a single unit, all doing the same thing, the verb is singular. The team runs. But the second the members of that group start acting like individuals, the verb becomes plural. The team are arguing. Now, when you connect subjects with or nor, things get pretty interesting. But the rule is actually dead simple. The verb agrees with whichever subject is closer to it. It's called the proximity rule. So if the plural friends is right next to the verb is plural, run. If the singular boy is closer, the verb is singular, runs. Simple as that. This shows how some words are true shapeshifters. Words like all, some, and none can be singular or plural. How do you know which one to use? Well, it depends entirely on the noun they're referring to. So, all of the chicken is gone because chicken is a single mass. But all of the chickens are gone because you're talking about multiple birds.
And this exact same logic applies to fractions, percentages, and even money. The verb doesn't agree with the fraction of the number. It agrees with the thing being measured. If that thing is a singular whole, like sand or wheat, the verb is singular. If it's a bunch of countable items, like books or teachers, the verb is plural.
Okay, here is another super common trap. Sentences that begin with there is or there are. Here's the secret. In these sentences, the word there is never the subject. The real subject actually comes after the verb. So you have to look ahead to find it, and then make sure your verb agrees. There is a problem, but there are problems.
So, after all those twists, turns, and exceptions, what's the one thing you absolutely need to remember? It really all boils down to one single powerful idea.
And here it is. This is the whole shebang. No matter how crazy the sentence gets, no matter how many distracting phrases or tricky nouns they throw at you, your mission is always the same. Find the one true subject, figure out if it's singular or plural, and make the verb match. Everything else is just noise.
And just like that, you have the tools to conquer subject-verb agreement. But here's a little challenge for you. As you go about your week, just listen. Listen how people talk, to podcasts, to the TV. You're going to start noticing these so-called errors absolutely everywhere. And it makes you wonder, right? Is language really defined by the rules in a book, or by how we all actually use it every single day? Now that you know the rules, you get to decide.